9. The Dog That Loved Creosote. "The police don't want my help, Watson," said Holmes, as soon as the inspector had gone. "Inspector Jones thinks he has solved the crime and caught the murderer, but they have arrested the wrong man." I agreed with Holmes. I was sure that Thaddeus Sholto was not the murderer. "We must be quick, Watson," said Holmes. "I want you to do 2 things. First, take Miss Morstan home. Second, go to this address, 3 Pinchin Lane. Ask for Mr. Sherman. He has an old dog called Toby. I want you to bring Toby here. Meet me here in 2 hours' time." I took Miss Morstan home in Thaddeus Sholto's cab. She was very upset by what had happened and spoke very little. I promised that I would visit her the next day. Then I went to the address which Holmes had given me. It was the middle of the night, and the streets of London were black and silent. As the cab went along, I thought about everything that had happened. We had discovered the truth about some things. The death of Captain Morstan, the sending of the pearls to Miss Morstan, the advertisement, the letter. All these things were clear. Now there were other mysteries which we had to solve. Where was the Indian treasure? What was the plan found in Morstan's luggage? Who wanted Bartholomew Sholto to die? Where were the pygmy and the wooden-legged men? What did all these things mean? And what was the mysterious sign of 4? I hoped that Sherlock Holmes would discover the answer to these questions. Soon I arrived in Pinchin Lane, the address where Holmes had sent me. It was a very poor street, and the houses were old and dirty. I found house number 3 and knocked on the door. After some time, a face looked out from a window above. It was not a friendly face. "Who are you?" said the face angrily. "What do you want?" "Come down and open the door," I said. "I have something to ask you."
"Go away at once," said the face. "If you don't, I'll let out 50 dogs upon you."
"My friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes," I began. At these words, the window suddenly shut, and a few minutes later, the door opened. I saw an old man with grey hair and beard, holding a candle in his hand.
"Come in, sir," he said. "I'm Mr. Sherman. I'm sorry that I was rude. I didn't know that you were a friend of Sherlock Holmes."
I went into the small, dirty house and stopped in astonishment. There were cages everywhere I looked. All the cages contained different kinds of animals. I could see their eyes shining in the candlelight.
"What does Mr. Holmes want?"
asked the old man. "A dog called Toby," I answered.
"Toby is my best dog," said Mr. Sherman. "He loves to follow strong smells, especially the smell of creosote. That's his favourite."
"That's why Mr. Holmes wants him," I said.
"Wait here. I'll go and get him."
The old man came back after a few minutes. He was pulling a dog on a lead. The dog looked very strange. It had very long ears and very short legs, and its eyes were large and sad.
"This is Toby," said Mr. Sherman. "He'll go with you. He's a friendly dog."
The dog licked my hand and wagged its tail. I put some money into Mr. Sherman's hand, and the old man gave me Toby's lead. When I got back to Pondicherry Lodge, I found Sherlock Holmes standing outside the door. He was smoking his pipe.
"Excellent, Watson,"
he cried when he saw me.
"You've done well. Good dog, Toby. Come here. Good dog."
Holmes took a handkerchief out of his pocket and gave it to Toby to smell. The handkerchief was covered with creosote. The dog went mad with excitement. His sad eyes shone with happiness, and his tail wagged.
"See how he loves the smell," said Holmes. "We won't have any problems now."
Holmes pointed at a drain pipe, which went down from the roof of the house. "While you were away, Watson," he said, "I went up onto the roof and discovered how the pygmy climbed up and climbed down again. He used that drain pipe." The drain pipe ran all the way down from the roof to the garden below. There was a large barrel full of water under the end of the drain pipe. "He climbed down that drain pipe and onto the barrel beneath," said Holmes. "It was very easy to follow his trail. He left marks everywhere. He also dropped this." Holmes put his hand in his pocket and took out a small bag made of dried grass. I looked inside. To my horror, I saw 5 or 6 long, dark thorns. They were the same as the one which killed Bartholomew Sholto. "The murderer has lost these," said Holmes. "Let's hope that he doesn't have any more. Don't touch them, Watson. They are poisoned. But come, where's Toby? We must begin." Holmes took Toby's lead and pulled the dog to the bottom of the water barrel. Toby smelled all round carefully. Suddenly, he began to bark excitedly. He had found his favourite smell, the smell of creosote. Then he started to pull at his lead. "He's on the trail," cried Holmes. "Let's go!" The hunt begins. Toby pulled at his lead and ran quickly through the grass. He ran so quickly that it was difficult to follow him. The sky was beginning to get light now. Toby ran along the paths in the garden under the trees and bushes. Then he reached the garden wall and ran along beside it. Finally, he stopped at a place in the wall where the bricks were loose. "This is the place where they got into the garden," said Holmes. "It is easy to climb up and down here. Look, do you see this mark? It is the print of a man's hand." He pointed at a flat stone. I saw a dirty handprint on the stone. Holmes picked up the dog and climbed over the wall. I followed. Toby soon found the trail again. Toby did not look to the right or the left. He ran straight ahead with his nose to the ground. He loved the smell of creosote. Nothing could stop him from following it. As we hurried along, I thought about the wooden-legged man and the pygmy. I wondered what would happen when we found them. I knew that they were dangerous. I wished that I had brought my gun with me. Toby was still following the trail. Now we were passing through small, narrow streets. The people were just beginning to wake up. The men were going on their way to work. The women were opening their windows and cleaning their houses. Suddenly, Toby ran down a path. This path led straight down towards the River Thames. Soon the river appeared in front of us. Toby ran faster and faster. The path went down to the water's edge. It ended at a small wooden jetty. Toby stopped. He ran backwards and forwards, trying to find the smell. He looked up at us sadly with his large eyes. He did not know what to do. "They've got into a boat here," said Holmes. There was a small house beside the jetty. A notice was hanging from one of the windows. On it was written in large letters, "Mordecai Smith, boats and steam launch for hire." There was no one on the jetty. Several small boats were near the jetty on the bank of the river. Holmes looked at these boats. "I wonder where the steam launch is," he said. "I think we must ask a few questions." He knocked loudly at the door of the house. A large woman with a red face opened it. A child was crying somewhere inside the house. I saw that the woman was very upset about something. She had been crying. "Good morning," said Holmes politely. "Are you Mordecai Smith's wife?"
"Yes," replied the woman. "What do you want?"
"Could I speak to your husband, please?" asked Holmes.
"No, you can't. He isn't here. I haven't seen him since yesterday morning."
"Oh," said Holmes. "I wanted to hire a boat."
"Well, perhaps I can help you," said Mrs. Smith. "Which boat do you want?"
"I wanted to hire the steam launch. I have heard it is a very good boat. Let me see, what's the name? The
Aurora, sir," said Mrs. Smith.
"Oh, yes, that's right. I remember now. But where is the Aurora?" said Holmes, looking around. "I don't see a steam launch anywhere."
"Oh, sir, my husband has gone in the Aurora,"
Mrs. Smith replied, and burst into tears.
"I'm very worried about him. I don't trust that wooden-legged man."
"What wooden-legged man, Mrs. Smith?" asked Holmes in a surprised voice.
"I don't know who he is, sir, but my husband went with the wooden-legged man in the Aurora yesterday morning and hasn't come back."
"11. Mystery on the River." "I'm very sorry to hear that, Mrs. Smith," said Holmes. "Tell me, was this wooden-legged man alone?"
"I don't know, sir. I didn't see anyone else, but it was very dark. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I could not be sure."
"What does the Aurora look like?" asked Holmes.
"The Aurora is black, sir, with 2 red stripes down each side. It has a black funnel with a white stripe. The Aurora is the fastest boat on the river," answered Mrs. Smith.
Holmes looked worried. "That's very interesting," he said. "Try not to worry about your husband, Mrs. Smith. I am going up the river myself. If I see Mr. Smith, I will tell him that I have seen you. Goodbye."
"Goodbye, and thank you,"
said Mordecai Smith's wife. She had stopped crying. She went inside her house and closed the door. "Watson, we must find Mordecai Smith and the Aurora as soon as possible," said Holmes. "Mordecai Smith and the wooden-legged man are working together. Smith has taken the 2 murderers in his steam launch. They are all hiding somewhere on the river." "It will be easy to find them," I said. "You must tell the police at once." Holmes shook his head. "No, I don't want these criminals to know that anyone is looking for them. They will try to escape again. I have a better idea," Holmes went on. "I have many agents everywhere up and down the river. These agents are clever. I pay them to bring me information. They always know what is happening on the river. I will ask my agents to look for Mordecai Smith and the Aurora. But you look tired, Watson. Let's go home and have breakfast." It was now nearly 8 o'clock in the morning. I did feel very tired. I was glad to go home to Baker Street. When I had a bath and changed my clothes, I came downstairs to breakfast. Holmes was drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. "Look, Watson," he said. "Here is a report about the murder of Bartholomew Sholto at Pondicherry Lodge, and about the arrest of Thaddeus Sholto by Inspector Jones last night." I took the paper and read the report. I felt sorry for Thaddeus Sholto. Inspector Jones had made a stupid mistake by arresting him. I knew that Sholto was not guilty of the murder of his brother. I hoped that we would be able to help Thaddeus. But would we be able to find the murderers? Suddenly, there was a loud knock on the door. A few minutes later, 12 children ran into the room. Their clothes were dirty and ragged. They had no shoes on their feet. Their hair was untidy, and their faces had not been washed for a very long time. But they seemed happy and cheerful. "Good morning, Mr. Holmes," said the children together. "Who are these children, Holmes?" I asked in astonishment. Holmes laughed. "These are my agents," he said. "I sent a message for them to come. Look at them. They can go anywhere, see everything, hear everything. Nobody is afraid of children." Holmes gave each of the children some money. Then he told them what he wanted them to do. "You must find a steam launch called the Aurora," he said. "It is on the river somewhere, and belongs to Mordecai Smith. The Aurora is black with 2 red stripes down each side. It has a black funnel with a white stripe. You must find it. Now go." The children ran out of the room, all talking together. They went down the stairs and out into the street. "My agents will find Mordecai Smith and the Aurora," said Holmes. "Now we must wait." 12. Inspector Jones receives a telegram. We had not slept all night and I was very tired. I went to bed and woke late in the afternoon. I felt much better. I went downstairs. Holmes was reading a book. I saw at once that he was worried. "Is there any news?" I asked.
"Nothing at all. I can't understand it. I am very surprised and disappointed. My agents say that they cannot find the Aurora."
"Can I do anything to help?" I asked.
"Nothing."
"Then I'll take Toby back to Pinchin Lane. Then I'll go and see Miss Morstan and tell her what has happened." I went to Miss Morstan's house. She looked very pleased to see me. I told her that we had not found the treasure yet, but she did not look disappointed. I was surprised about this, but I was also very pleased. I said goodbye to her and drove back to Baker Street. I went to bed, but I could not sleep. I was thinking about Miss Morstan. I wanted to ask her to marry me. All night I heard Holmes walking up and down in his room. Next morning, he looked tired and ill.
"My agents cannot find the Aurora," he said impatiently. "They have searched the whole river. The Aurora has disappeared."
We waited all that day, but there was no news. The next day, I woke early. It was still dark. To my surprise, Sherlock Holmes was standing by my bed. He was dressed and ready to go out.
"I have had an idea, Watson," he said. "I am going up the river myself. Perhaps I can find the launch. You must stay here. There may be some messages."
Holmes left without another word. That day, the time passed very slowly. I picked up a book but was unable to read it. I was thinking all the time about the wooden-legged man and the pygmy. Where were they? Why could Holmes not find them? I was worried about my friend. I knew that he was a clever detective, but perhaps this time he would not be able to catch the murderers. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had a visitor. It was Inspector Jones, the police officer. I was astonished. Inspector Jones had changed completely. 2 days ago, he had been very rude to Holmes. He had not wanted his help. Now, he was very quiet and polite. "Good afternoon, Dr. Watson," said Inspector Jones. "I'm afraid that I made a bad mistake. I have had to let Thaddeus Sholto go. Sholto has proved that he was at a friend's house when his brother died." Inspector Jones looked so sad that I began to feel sorry for him. "I've received a telegram from Sherlock Holmes," the inspector went on. "Here it is." I took the telegram and read it.
"Inspector Jones, go to Baker Street at once. Wait for me there. I know where Sholto's murderers are hiding. Come with us tonight if you want to catch them. Holmes."
"That's excellent," I cried. "Forget about Thaddeus Sholto. You'll soon have some other prisoners, Inspector Jones." At that moment, the door opened and Holmes came into the room. He was smiling. "What news?" we asked together.
"I know where the Aurora is," Holmes replied. "It wasn't on the river at all. The Aurora has been hidden in a boatyard near the river for 2 days. I knew the launch at once. Mordecai Smith, the owner, was there too. He was talking to someone, and he was speaking very loudly. He said that he had to have the Aurora ready for 8 o'clock tonight. His 2 gentlemen were leaving for America. Their ship was waiting for them out at sea, and they must not be late. I knew immediately what they were planning to do," went on Holmes, "and I know what we must do. Inspector Jones, will you help me?"
"I was wrong before, and you were right," said Jones sadly. "I didn't listen to you then, but I'll help you now."
"Good,"
said Holmes.
"We need a fast police launch, as fast as the Aurora. It must be ready this evening, and 2 or 3 strong policemen to come with us."
"I'll arrange all this," said Jones.
"Excellent,"
said Holmes.
"Tonight, the 3 of us, you and I and Dr. Watson, will be on the police launch. We will be waiting outside the boatyard at 8 o'clock. We'll be ready for the Aurora when she comes out. We'll catch the murderers, and we'll get the treasure.
The chase on the river. At 7 o'clock that evening, the three of us, Inspector Jones, Holmes, and myself, went down to the river. Both Holmes and I had guns in our pockets. Inspector Jones had promised to let us use the police launch. This launch was now waiting. 4 strong men were on board the launch. Soon we were moving quickly down the River Thames. The police launch was very fast. We passed all the other boats on the river without difficulty. This pleased Holmes very much. By 8 o'clock we had arrived opposite the boatyard where the Aurora was hidden. It was now dark. We waited. 10 minutes passed. Suddenly a launch came out of the boatyard. It was black, with 2 red stripes. It was moving very quickly.
"That's the Aurora," cried Holmes. "Follow it, quickly! Faster! Faster! We must catch them!"
We were going so fast that the police launch started to shake, but we could not get near to the Aurora. The chase became more and more exciting. We went in and out between other boats. Many times I closed my eyes. I was sure that we would hit something. At last we got closer to the Aurora. Inspector Jones turned on a light and shone it on the Aurora.
"Stop!" he cried. "Stop! We are the police!"
In the lamplight we could see some men on board the Aurora. One man was sitting at the back of the launch. Beside him was a strange, dark shape. We could also see Mordecai Smith, the owner of the Aurora. He was working as hard as he could. He was trying to make the engine of the launch go faster. Inspector Jones shouted again, "Stop!" Suddenly, the man at the back of the Aurora stood up. He shouted at us angrily. He was a big, strong man. Then I noticed that his right leg was missing. There was a wooden stump in its place. This was the wooden-legged man. At the sound of the man's voice, the strange dark shape beside him moved. It was a small, dark man, the smallest man I have ever seen. But the pygmy's head was large. His face was hard and cruel. As soon as Holmes saw the pygmy, he took out his gun. I did the same.
"Shoot him if he moves his hand,"
said Holmes. At that moment, the pygmy put a short piece of wood to his lips. We fired our guns together. The pygmy fell backwards into the water with a terrible cry. The wooden-legged man turned the Aurora towards the bank of the river. As soon as the Aurora touched the bank of the river, he jumped out. It happened so quickly that we were not able to slow down and stop the police launch. The man had landed in the soft, wet mud of the river bank, but his wooden leg had stuck in the mud. He could not move. We managed to turn the police launch round. We went towards the wooden-legged man and threw him a rope. Then we pulled him up over the side of our launch. Mordecai Smith was still on the Aurora, but he did not try to escape. We tied the Aurora to our launch. The chase was over. On the deck of the Aurora there was a big, heavy chest. We were sure that it contained the Agra treasure. We carried the heavy box onto the police launch. Suddenly, Holmes stopped and pointed.
"Look,"
he said. I looked where Holmes was pointing. I saw one of the pygmy's poisoned thorns. It was fixed in the wood where Holmes and I had been standing. The poisoned thorn had passed through the air between us. Holmes was smiling, but I felt cold and sick. We had escaped a horrible death. As we went back up the river, we shone our light on the water. We were looking for the body of the pygmy, but we saw nothing. His body still lies somewhere at the bottom of the River Thames. The treasure is lost. The wooden-legged man was our prisoner. He was sitting in the police launch opposite the treasure chest. He was about 50 years old. He had black curly hair and a black beard. He did not look angry any more. He was not interested in anything.
"What's your name?"
Holmes asked him.
"Jonathan Small,"
replied the man.
"Jonathan Small?"
repeated Holmes. He took out the piece of paper which had been found in Captain Morstan's luggage. Holmes read out what was written on the piece of paper. Jonathan Small, Mohammed Singh, Abdullah Khan, Dost Akbar, the sign of 4.
"Give me that paper," said the man.
Holmes gave it to him.
"Yes," Small said. "I am one of the sign of 4. This paper is a plan of the fortress at Agra in India. My 3 friends and I found the treasure many years ago. Tonight I have lost the Agra treasure, and you have killed my dear friend, Tonga. I'm not sorry about the deaths of Sholto and his son. I'm not sorry about anything. Do what you like with me."
"You will tell us your story later," said Holmes. "But first, Watson, will you take the treasure to Miss Morstan?" "I shall be pleased to do that," I said. But I was not speaking the truth. I did not want to take the treasure to Miss Morstan. I did not want her to become a rich woman. "Inspector Jones and I will take our prisoner to Baker Street," said Holmes. "We'll meet you there, Watson." Then Holmes turned to Jonathan Small. "But where is the key of the treasure chest?"
"At the bottom of the river,"
replied Jonathan Small.
Why did you throw it away?"
cried Inspector Jones angrily.
"You've made things very difficult for us."
Jonathan Small did not speak. He did not care what Jones said. When we got to the jetty, I got out of the launch with the treasure chest. I found a cab and drove to Miss Morstan's house. Miss Morstan was sitting by the window. She was wearing a pretty white dress, and her hair was shining brightly in the lamplight. "How nice to see you," she said when she saw me. "Do you have any news?" "I've brought something better than news," I said, trying to speak happily. "I've brought the Agra treasure." I put the heavy chest down on the table. Miss Morstan did not look very excited. "So, this is the famous Agra treasure," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Half of it belongs to you, and half to Thaddeus Sholto. You are a rich woman now, Miss Morstan." "The treasure can wait," she said. "First, I want to hear all about your adventures. Please sit down and tell me everything." So I told her everything that had happened. I told her how Holmes found the Aurora. I told her about Inspector Jones and Thaddeus Sholto. I told her about the chase on the river, the death of the pygmy, and how we had caught Jonathan Small. "How brave you are," she said. "I didn't know that you were in such terrible danger." "It's finished now," I said. "Let's open the treasure chest. There isn't a key. How can we open the chest?" Miss Morstan left the room and came back with a heavy metal bar. I took the bar and put it under the lid of the chest. Then I turned it, and the lid opened. I lifted up the lid. My hands were shaking. We both looked inside. Then we looked at each other in astonishment. The chest was empty. The chest was made of very thick iron. This was why it was so heavy. "The treasure is lost," said Miss Morstan quietly. "Thank God," I said. "Why do you say thank God?" asked Miss Morstan. "Because now I can ask you to marry me," I replied, holding her hand. "Because I love you, Mary. Now you are not going to be rich, so I can tell you my feelings. That is why I said, thank God." "Then I say thank God too," she whispered. 15. The Sign of 4. When I got back to Baker Street, Holmes, Inspector Jones, and the prisoner, Jonathan Small, were all waiting for me. I showed them the empty treasure chest. Small began to laugh.
"Where is the treasure, Small?"
shouted Jones angrily.
"The Agra treasure belongs to the sign of 4, said Small quietly. "No one else will have it. I threw it all to the bottom of the river."
We all stood astonished. The great treasure of Agra was lost forever.
"The Agra treasure is unlucky," said Small. "It has never brought happiness to anyone. It brought death to Captain Morstan. It brought fear and guilt to Major Sholto. Bartholomew Sholto was murdered because of it. And to me and the other members of the Sign of Four, it has brought prison for the rest of our lives."
"You must tell us your story," said Holmes. "What is the Sign of Four?" Jonathan Small began his strange story, and we listened.
"I went to India as a soldier in the British Army," said Small. "One day, soon after I arrived, I had an accident and lost my leg. After that, I could not fight any more. Then there was terrible fighting between the Indians and the British. The British all hid in an old fortress at Agra. They shut themselves inside. The walls of this fortress were very thick. The Indians could not get in. I also went to Agra. I had 3 Indian friends who had fought for the British. They came to Agra with me. These men were Muhammad Singh, Abdullah Khan, and Dost Akbar. When we were in the Agra fortress, we heard a strange story. It was about a great treasure which had been hidden in the fortress. It had been hidden for many years. The 4 of us decided to look for this treasure. And one day, we found it. It was hidden under the floor in a secret room. We were astonished by what we had found. We had never seen so many beautiful jewels. The 4 of us decided not to say anything about what we had found. We decided to leave the treasure hidden in the secret room in the fortress. When the fighting was finished, we would be able to take the treasure away with us. We made a promise to each other. We agreed that we would always work together. We would share the treasure between us. We became the Sign of Four. But a terrible thing happened. 2 British soldiers were killed in a fight. We had not killed them, but we were arrested for their murder. We were sent to prison in the Andaman Islands.
"Is that where you met Major Sholto and Captain Morstan?" asked Holmes.
"Yes," said Small. "Sholto and Morstan were the officers in charge of the prisoners there. We were in a terrible situation. We knew where the Agra treasure was, but we were not able to go and get it. We were prisoners. Also, we were afraid that someone else might find the treasure. We did not know what to do. At last, we told Sholto and Morstan about the great treasure. We asked them to help the 4 of us to escape. When we were free, we would get the treasure and share it with them. But Sholto said that he did not believe us. He said he did not know if we were speaking the truth. Sholto did not know if the treasure would be there. He said he would go to India. If he found the treasure, he would come back. He would help us escape from prison. Sholto asked the 4 of us to give him a plan of the fortress at Agra. We did not want to give Sholto the plan. I didn't trust him. But in the end, we had to agree. We gave one plan to Sholto and another to Morstan. Sholto went to India, but he never came back. He found the treasure and took it to England. He stole it from the Sign of Four and also from his friend Morstan. And from that day, I decided to have revenge on Sholto.
Small was silent for a few moments. He was thinking about what Sholto had done. Then he went on with his story.
I made friends with one of the people of the Andaman Islands, he said. The people there are pygmies. They are very small, but they are very brave. One day, I found one of these pygmies lying under a tree. He was very ill. I looked after him. He slowly got better. He became my friend. His name was Tonga. Tonga helped me to escape from the islands. He had a small boat. One dark night, We put lots of food into the boat, and we sailed together from the Andaman Islands.
Holmes had been listening carefully while Small told his story. Now he spoke.
"Ah, I understand,"
he said.
"Major Sholto received a letter. What was written in the letter frightened him to death. It must have been the news of your escape which killed him."
Small went on with his story.
"At last Tonga and I reached London, but I was too late to have revenge on Sholto. Sholto was dying. He saw my face at the window. That night, I got into his room and left a message. It was from the Sign of 4. Tonga and I waited 6 years. We watched Pondicherry Lodge and Bartholomew Sholto carefully. When Bartholomew Sholto found the treasure, we knew about it immediately. With Tonga's help, I got into his room. Tonga killed Bartholomew Sholto with a poisoned thorn. We took the treasure, left the paper, and went. I had paid Mordecai Smith to take us to a ship. We were planning to go to America, but now everything has changed. Tonga is dead, and I am your prisoner, and the Agra treasure is lost forever."
We were all silent. We were thinking of the great treasure which was lost in the mud at the bottom of the River Thames. Perhaps it was better there.
"Dr. Watson,"
said Holmes, when Inspector Jones had taken Small away.
"That is the end of our adventure."
"Yes," I said, "but I have some very good news. Miss Morstan and I are going to get married."
"Excellent,"
said Holmes.
"The Agra treasure has at last brought happiness to someone."